I am beyond thrilled to host Rosie Summers today here. Rosie, there in one of the windows.
Hey guys.
Rosie is an amazing VR artist. I've been following her work on social media for a long time now, and I was like, oh, I wish we could bring her into class sometime, or just in one of our distinguished lectures, just to see that work and how things are happening behind the scenes. This is actually an opportunity because Rosie is in the UK and we can have her here. So it's pretty exciting. And then we have also people like Paul joining us here, which is pretty exciting. So Rosie is a 3D animator and VR artist at XR Games. They recently released Angry Birds 2 for PlayStation VR. Yay! She's doing amazing performances, creating art in VR. She performed in festivals and many different events, working with places like BBC and Google and so on. This is a great opportunity for all of us to see the artist perspective of things. So I think it's super complementary and necessary. So to combine both worlds. So yeah, take it away.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that intro. That was fantastic. Cool. So let me just share my screen. Hey everybody. I don't really need to introduce myself. You already did a fantastic job there. Yeah, so in this talk, I'm going to be sharing my industry experience of building virtual realities from the inside out using creative tools such as Tilt Brush and also Quill, and exploring the benefits of using these powerful tools to bring a whole new dimension to the way you create artwork, from pre-visualization to production. And yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal journey as well, how I got into this, and some of the theory and research behind what I do as well. And hopefully at the end, a live demo if all goes well. But it went well just there, so yeah, should be good. And yeah, I really hope you enjoy my talk because, you know, considering I know you guys are computer scientists and stuff, even if you don't consider yourself an artist, VR art tools really have the power to bring out that hidden creative streak, however hidden it is. So yeah, I'm sure you think about becoming a little bit more of an artist after this as well. Hopefully you get inspired. So yeah, a little bit about my journey. I started off as a fine artist. Emotional portraiture was my thing, painting portraits of subjects and really trying to tell a story of how the subject was feeling, their emotions, just trying to portray that through how I used paint, whether that be the brush strokes or the colours I used. But I got a bit bored of that just because of how static it was. I really wanted to bring more vigour and more life into my stories, which is how I found animation, because that is the art of making things move. So it was through studying animation at uni that I found VR to explore a more intimate connection to narratives. So you could say I'm a little bit of a dinosaur to the medium, because at that time it was 2014. I had access to an Oculus DK1 where I experienced that pretty bad French fountain demo just on the left. Just on the right there. It was pretty good at the time because I'd never seen anything else like it. So at the time I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I had no idea we're at this level of tech yet. But then I look back now and really it wasn't that great, but man, it was fantastic. That first time putting that headset on, I just can't describe how blown away I was. And then a few months later, I experienced the Google Cardboard, which was, I'm sure most of you might have tried that. It's just a poxy piece of cardboard, you put your phone inside and it takes you to this other world. I didn't have high expectations because, you know, it's just a flimsy piece of cardboard with your phone. But I put on the demo experience, which is just on the right there with a little fox, and he takes you on this little journey. And oh my gosh, something happened as soon as that cardboard was on my face, and I was blown away. It felt like I was taken straight from this world into a completely other world, even to the extent that when I was flying in the experience, I felt myself physically just go, wow. And that was the first time a piece of moving image had ever made me feel that way. I had such this deep-rooted and intimate connection to this world, and it was just through the screen of my phone. And then I saw Glenn Keane, who is a famous Disney animator who's worked on many of their great films like Pocahontas and Tarzan. So I look up to him a lot as an animator, and to see him using this tool to bring a whole new dynamic to his character design, I was absolutely amazed. And he drew the beast. When he drew him to scale, towering over him, like he had a presence in the space, and like he was real and existing there. And it shows the relatability you get to characters in VR, even just quick sketches of ones, which this one was. And it was actually the next day after that I bought my first headset, and that's where my VR creative journey really started to take off. But why opposed to traditional mediums? That's the question I get asked a lot. And the biggest difference is the fact that now with VR art, you have the chance to actually exist inside your artwork. You can create a world around you and live inside it, and create a tree, sit under it, create a beach and lie on it. You know, it transports you into other worlds. When you design characters, you can paint them to scale. You can paint them in the space, walk around them. They have a physicality to them. With traditional art, if you were going to scale a character up, for example, using clay or physical objects, you'd have to have a hefty amount of materials, and it'd be quite hard to achieve what you can achieve in VR. But with infinite space as your canvas, there's so many possibilities. But where do you start? With so many possibilities at your fingertips, where do you start? And I started off my journey researching, because at the time when I started my VR journey, it was very early on, and nothing that I was trying to find help and research on it, but there wasn't really, it's very scarce. So I did my own research. I was probing our presence with virtual worlds, and I was really interested in exploring the relation we have to 3D worlds and virtual reality as well, and just analyzing that overall relationship between the player and the environment and our virtual presence, because it's that extent to which we believe in the world that I was really interested in. I thought the perfect way to explore this was to create like a mini social experiment, VR social experiment. So this is very, very stripped back, simple, very simple graphics, because I made it like within 2 weeks. It was, ridiculous. And there's no teleporting. There was like a set space that you had to walk around, because I had a Vive, you see, so I really wanted to use that real world spacing and see how that affected your knowledge of the environment. And the experience was very simple, and it went through changes, and at every change I evaluated what everyone was looking at, whether they noticed the changes and how they formed their own narrative around the environment, really. I even used a heart rate monitor just to see how they were feeling at certain points, because as you can see now on the screen, they're really high up on this plank. So I noticed that the heart rate actually went up at these moments when it was, when you would be scared because you're high up above the earth on this point. And they had sort of feelings of claustrophobia as well when in certain tight spaces. It was super interesting to get such feedback from that, because I'd never tried and tested the immersiveness of VR before. And to further increase the presence, I had a fan, which I turned on at stages where the environment was more exposed, just to really harmonize those two worlds and increase their immersion there. And I gained some really interesting data from that. Everybody felt heightened emotions when they were in this world. Many were emotions that would feel if it was real, like I was saying, claustrophobia and fear of heights. And 83% were so immersed in wanting to explore beyond the play space. So for those people, their immersion was so great, they wanted more exploration, which was fascinating. And everybody felt immersed, with 70% rated themselves as completely, which was quite an astonishing result, considering it's such a simple environment. And everybody felt settled into the environment under 5 minutes as well, which was really interesting to hear that, because a lot of people that were trying my experience was their first time in VR, because it would have been so new at the time. And this could have been, I thought about this, and I thought it could have been because I allowed a moment with just them and their new world before I introduced any sort of action, any sort of characters or any animation. It was just them and their world to sort of allow time for that grounding process. And 85% of people said the audio increased the level that they were immersed, which highlights its importance, We often overlook audio and add it on at the last second, but it can really make the experience, 85% of people there said it increased their level of immersion. So, whilst in that world, people and instinct, we're going to want all these sensations and feelings we get in the real world complemented in the virtual. And it's going to take people out of immersion if we don't get those feelings. When you onboard people into VR, you often feel like you're taking some of your senses away, but all you're doing is just transporting them into a virtual world where their mind is wandering, the mind is exploring. And you need to make sure people feel as comfortable and at ease as possible. Therefore, by having this binaural audio, which is where audio is 3D positioned, people feel more immersed because it's what we're used to experiencing. Same goes with interactivity as well, complementing that sense of touch that we're used to with haptic feedback, and even real world placements of virtual objects if you're doing an installation, for example. So that's having a 3D model of an object and then in the physical world placing an object in the exact same location, which is really hard to achieve but super effective, because when you're picking up those objects in VR and you get that haptic feedback, that object, then it really solidifies your presence in that world. But this experiment also taught me several things that can dispel immersion as well, and one of those most important factors being frame rate, because when we have that choppy frame rate, we're instantly thrown out and recognize that this reality isn't real. And it can make us feel sick as well, which leads me on to motion sickness, which we're working really hard to combat that. And we've come up with some effective ways of blocking out the sides of the headset, so when motion is incurred, they don't feel it as much because it's not in the peripheral, which is what a lot of scientists looked into as the reason why we get motion sick. And ridding of motion sickness just overall orientates around making sure the user is as comfortable as possible, and having non-jarring movements and making sure our movements are as natural as they are in the physical world. And yeah, even the headset itself can dispel immersion as well. If we notice that the headset's there, whether it's through the wires that we have trailing around us or just the weight of the headset, it could take us out of the experience. Through this experiment, I learned so much about VR's immersive potential, and it dramatically shaped our immersion and our presence in virtual worlds, which is why I've shared that with you today as well, because that really helped me when I was starting off in my VR world building journey, to think of those factors every time I was going to make an experience or make anything. I think, right, let's look at these statistics. What have I learned, and what can I expand upon in my next experience? When immersion into worlds is done right, philosophically thinking, we sort of permeate the screen and we encounter this mind and body split almost. We have this physical body here, and then in this virtual world, our mind is exploring. And we're immersed, and through this, we can sort of forget briefly our organic self because we're embodying this character or this avatar or something like that. It's fascinating to think of that. And it could even lead to different personality traits. We can start to thrive and take what we want from this virtual world. And this to me is one of the most profound effects of virtual reality immersion. It's the ability to govern our own virtual existence. But we can't govern the experience completely. We can only be as active as much as developers make us, which in a sense is what I've always thought of. Does it make developers a sort of deity of our virtual worlds and emotions? It's a fascinating concept, really, because we don't just sit and watch it. We're actively moving our heads around. It's such an active and engaging activity. And some people who have experienced something in VR have said to have mistaken it for an actual memory, which was really, really surprising to hear that. I think it happened mostly in children, but they actually recalled experience, and it was a virtual experience. It wasn't actually a real experience that happened. So this is why VR is currently being looked at as an aid for dementia and stuff, because of how it stimulates the brain. And this exposes the power that us VR creators have. It's a huge responsibility, and we should approach it with care, because whatever we create does have the potential to embed as real memories. If we are affected by an experience, we could actually be reliving it afterwards. But it's all about telling people what they're about to experience, because if you're doing a horror experience, for example, if you advertise it as that, and if you're about to onboard someone into a horror experience, you let them know what they're going to experience, because it can really shake you. I've been to several VR events where someone's just gone, hey, look at this, and then shoved it on my face, and I've been in a really scary experience that I wasn't prepared for. So yeah, it's just taking that little bit of care and letting people know what you're about to take them into, because the immersive mediums are powerful. And just the overall notion of putting someone in VR is very trustful, because you're putting them in a sort of vulnerable state. They're surrendering their sight and sound to the virtual world. And it's actually because of that reason that my VR works have tended to have a more positive, so creating spaces that give off a more peaceful and positive energy. And it's just so serene and joyful to be inside, just because that's what I like to exist inside. Creating spaces of negative connotations could have an effect on my mood and make me feel a bit sad, which is much more powerful because of how immersive VR is, obviously. And through my art in general, I've always taken a more character approach with portraits and animation. But for some reason, as soon as I was given VR and space as a canvas, I had this hidden urge to create environments instead. I was never an artist before. I hated painting environments, to be honest, because they just always looked bad. But then with VR, all of a sudden, I want to paint these spaces because I can be inside these spaces and explore them. And I think that was probably why I didn't like painting environments beforehand, is because it was all so flat and there wasn't anything else to it. It's just like, yeah, I've painted a field, but I can't go in that field, so what's the point? Environments are arguably the most important part of a VR experience as well. It's the element that grounds you in there. It grounds you in the world. It sets the tone and the feeling for the whole experience, because it's the first thing you see. And this makes the environment so integral to onboarding people into VR as well, which is the transition from, the physical to the virtual. Putting that headset on and finding your feet in the virtual world. And if it's not done properly, then it can ruin your experience totally, just before it's even started. I believe that in an experience, there should always be a moment it's just you and your new world before any characters or any action is introduced, just to really solidify your presence there. It really makes the experience. As mentioned earlier, there are many factors that can dispel immersion. It's important. That's so easy to get wrong. I've seen so many experiences where the scaling's been off and instantly I'm taken out of the experience. I'm like, whew, wow, that wall is too high or something, and I just know it's wrong. It takes me out of the experience. We need to correctly replicate our cognitive perceptions of the world in order to make it a comfortable experience inside VR. Unless the world is intentionally abstract, then those real world comparisons won't occur there. Just as much as looking up at some virtual trees, as I mentioned, or a wall or something, and you notice it's a bit bigger or smaller than it should be, or looking at the floor and thinking, hey, I'm a little bit too high up there, it really just throws you out the experience. And that's where testing is absolutely vital. And in VR, environments have the power to make you feel like real environments do because of the immersion. Designing the environment with comfort in mind, unless you're going for a horror experience, is just so important. When we design for environments on paper, we plan to invoke certain emotions and certain feelings, but sometimes these aren't properly translated into the virtual space just because of how we embody it. Several times I've done a color palette on paper, and then when I've taken that into Tilt Brush and tried to relay what I was trying to feel on the paper, it's not worked because I feel something completely different inside the world. This could just be down to color or how near or close objects are in the scene to you. To avoid this, I decided to start pre-visualizing all my worlds inside VR. And I did start using VR as an art tool pretty much from the get-go, because I recognized its potential within environment and character design. But where to begin? You put on a headset and you're confronted with a world of infinite space, and possibilities. And this megalophobia strikes, which is the fear of large open spaces. And you're hit thinking, wow, where do I start? It's something you've never encountered before. It's a different feeling. And the first thing I actually ever drew a tilt brush was an ocean. It was a pretty bad ocean, but it was an ocean. And I soon realized that starting off with organic forms was a lot more easier, because it's a lot more natural in VR, because you're on space, you're in space, you're not on a flat surface, so it's easier to paint with your body. But my skills were not progressing at the rate that I wanted. I really wanted to push the boundaries of VR art. So I thought about setting myself a challenge, which would allow me to get better at using the tool and progress at a faster rate. So I did Inktober, which is basically happens every October. For all 31 days, and artists are encouraged to create a piece of artwork a day around a single prompt of the day. So yeah, each day has a different prompt, and it's encouraged you make it in ink, but I did mine in Tilt Brush. And this one here, actually, that is on the screen right now, that was done in Quill, because I did Tilt Brush first year, then I did Quill, and then went back to Tilt Brush again for the third year. And the daily challenge aspect really encourages that rapid working and idea generation. So it was perfect for exercising the VR tools. And each one of my drawings ended up being a mini narrative, its own little 3D world, portraying story, portraying environment, and character development. And having worked in 3D before, I fell in love with how intuitive VR design is in comparison, because you don't, especially in Tilt Brush, because you don't have the complex UI systems to deal with. You can just hop in and you know exactly what to do, because you have one hand a palette and one hand a paintbrush. It's as simple as it gets. And it gives you a better understanding of 3D perspective and space as a result. And I was so excited to start incorporating it into my pipeline. With animation and games design, I found VR as a perfect middle ground from 2D concept to game-ready engine assets. Before pre-visualizing worlds in VR, my concepts to final resolution sometimes differed quite a bit, because I'd often plan on paper, then when inputted into the game, realize things don't sit right and have to change things and stuff like that. But with VR, being able to prototype so in depth inside the world itself, living in your concepts, it gives you another vision to your work that you just cannot get on paper. And this was the first time I incorporated VR into my workflow. I just couldn't believe the benefits and the speed and creative freedom in my games work.
A quick question from JJ here.
Yeah.
JJ did ask.
Oh yeah. So is your primary tool making all these environments using Tilt Brush?
Yes. Yeah, that's my go-to tool. I'll describe why actually in the next slide.
Oh, does Tilt Brush enable the making of animations as well?
No, that Quill is the one with the animation pipeline. You've got like a timeline, you've got a whole bunch of animation timeline stuff. But yeah, Tilt Brush is just for your artwork basically. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
No worries, happy to help. So actually I'll elaborate more on that just now. Where I work in XR Games, we also added it into our games pipeline too. I concepted levels for our release Angry Birds Movie 2 VR Under Pressure in this is using Quill, just because Quill offers a little bit more easy manipulation of strokes with a layer system and stuff like that, which was super helpful when working with a team of designers to easily adjust things just really quickly and really small. But yeah, you may ask, what's the difference between Quill and Tilt Brush? Quill offers a bit more editability with your brush strokes and a layer system, and an animation system, as I just talked about there. You can add sound, little sound, I don't know how best to sound objects into the scene and place them where you want. So when you are immersed into that scene, you can actually dictate where the sound's going to come from, which is super, super helpful So yeah, if you're wanting any animation pipeline stuff, Quill's you go to there. But yeah, the Quill has no lighting system, or everything's unlit and flat. If you want lighting, you got to paint it, sort of thing. And this, along with a poor UI, doesn't make it the nicest feeling of spaces. It's very much like the UI is it does a fantastic job. It's in there, but they've not sort of made it the nicest looking. Whereas Tilt Brush is the complete opposite of that. Tilt Brush has a wider expanse of brushes. So you have a bunch of lighting options, whole brushes offering different types, animated brushes, just a fantastic section of brushes that you can really bring your ideas to life exactly how you want it, super fast. And the UI and sound effects are just absolutely gorgeous. Everything is programmed to make you feel happy being there, which I think is important for VR because, as I mentioned earlier, that onboarding process, making us feel comfortable in the space, is so important that it can really make or break an experience. And Tilt Brush is just a wonderful place to be in. I also storyboarded in Tilt Brush, which allows you to visualize shot compositions firsthand. I mean, I say compositions because, yeah, it's not really traditional sense of composition, you know, because we're through the frame. But I say compositions more because they're more like compositional aspects that include where you are in the world, your surroundings, and your purpose there. So I was able to realize the best places for the player to be in the experience to get the most from it, to get the most from the narrative, and the most from their visual experience. You know, the happiest place for them to be in that world at that time, you know, their happy spot. And there's so much more creative freedom when you lay out design in VR because it becomes like interior design. You're just physically picking up, placing stuff, rearranging, recoloring, manipulating the space all around you exactly how you want it. And it's so freeing, and it opens the doors to more ideas in the process, just physically standing up and moving stuff. It's, yeah, I've never got that from the concept stages before. And it also gives you a great insight into the mood of your game or experience, and existing within the world, it gives you those certain feelings and emotions too, through choice of color, atmosphere, and color palette. The presence in the world intensifies those feelings, which is actually what I discovered in my social experiment right at the start. If you are creating an environment, you know people are going to explore and walk around, then quickly create a humanoid form and copy that human and paste them everywhere you know that someone's going to go. Because seeing human representations from a bird's eye view whilst you're looking down on this world that you're created is necessary, so you can keep zooming in and seeing from their perspective firsthand. This also gives you an idea of scalings and getting your scalings right, which I mentioned earlier is it's actually necessary to get those right in order to get that effective immersion there. And from an environment perspective as well, it's vital because you can actually plan out how much assets you need in a scene. So if you zoom in to right where the person's looking and have a look around, you can see where you're going to want to put your assets so the person feels like they get the most from the narrative, or asset placement so things look populated but not too populated that you start to get a chugging frame rate. So it's finding that balance about what can I put in the scene and how much can I put in the scene before it gets a little bit too crowded, just the necessary amount that will do the experience good. And as I said, like, these principles still apply for just 3D games in general. So if you're not making a VR experience, using a VR as pre-vis just for first-person games is absolutely fantastic, because it's no better view than being inside the world, right? On the subject of narratives and telling stories, Tilt Brush itself has many methods of telling virtual stories without the use of external tools and animation timelines, and exporting out to 3D software as well. And here are a few methods that I've used to tell stories just in Tilt Brush. You can tell a story inside a story. So this is an empowering piece I created called Future Goals, which has showed a young girl's journey from a football player to a professional footballer. We start off in one scene and then we get transported into another scene through a football. So this could be anything in your stories. This could be any object that you go inside and you see a whole different perspective. And it tells a narrative without actually any animation happening. You're just exploring the scene, which I find really fascinating. Just using that football as that world transition. It's just a really cool storytelling technique. And you can also use the scene load up feature. So when you click on a tilt brush scene, it loads up or strokes bit by bit. I don't know if you're getting obviously much of this because of the frame lag and stuff, but yeah, the scene comes to life when you click on it, which shows every stroke and the process you made them. And you can also tell a story with this as well, which is what I did for the rainforest fires. So you start off in the rainforest scene and then all this chaos ensues bit by bit just through paint strokes. To achieve this, you have to paint chronologically how you want the story to come to life, which is tricky for larger scenes, but it makes for an interesting storytelling perspective, just to watch this story unfold from inside it. And you gain a completely different perspective when you actually zoom out and look around as well. And it makes quite a powerful piece, really. And yeah, speaking of exploring worlds as well, I had the joys of working with the BBC team on creating the 7 continents in VR. They had the idea of creating each continent as a pie slice, fitting together to create a world. So each continent is filled with real natural landmarks from the continent and arranged from north to south of where they appear. And each natural wonder combines together to tell a story of the landscape formations in that continent. So each one has their own personality and colour palette. And so many continents have such varied landscapes. It was a struggle to combine them. For example, you have these snowy mountains in Russia, but then these flaming cliffs in Mongolia, which are very contrasting landmarks, but they're put together. I didn't think they'd fit, but I think it shows the chaotic nature that nature is. You know, it tells a story of the spontaneity that we have in nature. So I think it complements it okay there. And with VR art being so immersive and something that you know, because you live inside it, I noticed that I'd be spending ages drawing and hopped back into the experiences that I was previously drawing and taken back to the feelings I had when I was painting it and what I was wearing and certain smells and stuff like that. It was, the immersiveness really has an effect. So I thought I'd make like a quick little tilt brush diary for when I went on my summer holidays. So this is just a quick example. These were like 30-minute sketches of what I did that day on holiday. And I preserved them. This is using the Oculus Quest because you can just take it on the go with you wherever you want because it's a standalone headset. So I took it on holiday and did little sketches on a night. So every time I look at these now, I instantly think back to that holiday and it brings back all those memories, which is really special. And you can also introduce a little bit of interactivity in your tilt brush sketches as well. So last Christmas I made like a VR advent calendar. So day by day I opened a door and took out an object and populated the scene. So it was very interactive. People tuned in day by day to watch this world come to life. And I elaborated on this in Easter time with an egg hunt as well. So I put my Poly scene, which is the tilt brush scene, you upload it onto a hosting site called Poly, and people can go on that site, like it, and then download it and actually play it themselves or experience it themselves. And people did it. People downloaded the scene and had a explore, should I say, to find the 6 eggs that had hidden around the environment. So this is a lovely little escape as well, because it's during lockdown that I made this. And a lot of people just enjoyed that little escape with the families hopping into a virtual world and finding some eggs. You know, it's very rewarding to make. I've also been taking that interactivity a bit further as well and experimented with taking virtual creations into the physical with AR, using AR Foundation by Unity. And I plan to work with a computer scientist to create an AR gallery app as well. So where all my VR pieces just grayed out and placed into the world around me, and create a virtual gallery space, which would be really, really cool. And good for a portfolio as well. So yeah, I'm just forever probing the boundaries of virtual world building and seeing where I can take this fantastic medium. And just before I hop into a quick Tilt Brush demo, I'd just like to end this presentation on my biggest sketch to date, which was this My Reality sketch. It was my first ever self-portrait, and it was created to expose the world building power you feel as a creative and in VR, and the endless possibilities you have with the world as a canvas. As VR artists, we're world builders, space shifters, and reality makers, really. And it honestly felt like magic the first time that I was in Tilt Brush. And now, nearly 4 years later, I've created this piece exhibiting those feelings, I hope, you know, from my pose to the controller, representative of a wand, the stars, just all conjuring that magic feeling. Because, you know, we're sorcerers of new worlds and new dimensions. So while this piece explores my reality, you know, my intimate and personal connection to this powerful medium, I hope it resonates with you guys as well, and everyone, really, just to show that these worlds, they're in our hands. And yeah, that's my presentation. I'll attempt to hop into VR if all goes well and give you a quick whirl. Thank you for listening to that.
Cool. Thank you so much, Rosie. Let's do actually let's do a few questions while you're prepping.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I know like in Quill you can upload meshes. So when you're doing pre-vis, do you ever kind of mix those two, or do you normally do it from scratch? Or kind of like, because like sometimes animation will do paint overs with like the character models to see lighting and that kind of stuff in the scenes. Like, do you ever have to mix those two and do stuff like that, or is it all just from scratch?
That's a good question. I've often taken models, like you just said there, from 3D software such as Maya, and taken it into Tilt Brush and actually just painted over it quickly, and in Quill and stuff like that. There's an issue that you can't combine Tilt Brush sketches together, so you can't like add a bit from that and it from that, but you can combine Quill sketches together, which is super handy for stuff like that, and those little iterations bit by bit. But yeah, I have definitely done that, and it's super helpful, especially when you've got an environment as well. So you can take a pre-made blocky scene and then just quickly paint over, and it's super fast, you know, to pre-vis really quickly. If you've got a tight deadline and you really want to show something off, hey, I just did this quick block out. It's super handy.
And I guess, have you ever used assets that you've created in Quill or Tilt Brush in like a game engine, or are they too performance intensive?
It's very performance intensive, okay. Unfortunately, but you can you just need to know what brushes you use, because I've now, with so much time in Tilt Brush and now with a Quest, which gives you a good warning of memory and that you're taking up now, I've learned which brushes are the most expensive. So you sort of limit how much you're painting, and you can get your sketches pretty performant if you just know what you're doing and know what brushes are a bit more costly than others. So you can definitely get there, but mostly I've used it as a pre-vis just because of it's quite intensive. But yeah, as I said, I could easily make an experience now with the knowledge I know of which brushes are best to use.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yancy, you had a question.
Yeah, I have a question about lighting. So I really love the scene where there's a forest and there's a blue butterfly in it, and it has really warm and soft ambient lighting in the background. I wonder, did you paint that in the scene or did you add it in the post? Yeah,
no, I painted that in the scene. So in my quick demo that I do, I can actually show you that. But I added certain brushes which are emissive, and they let off really nice light. And if you use them at certain color tones, so if you go a bit darker, then you can get this really subtle light. And if you go a bit brighter in color, then the light comes off like really bright. So you can control the levels of light that you have in the scene, and yeah, you can create these really awesome lighting effects in Tilt Brush.
That's awesome. I have another question. So I used Tilt Brush a little bit before, and when I was trying to paint, there are just a lot of gaps between different brushes. But from your painting, they just look like they are solid, not like
Yeah.
the one that I painted were just like surfaces. So how do you make them look more like solid than surfaces?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm just constantly turning my scene around. So from the get-go, I'm just rotating, seeing how everything looks from each perspective. And if I'm doing like a face or something, then I'll take a picture from the front, a picture from the side, and a picture from the top, just so I know how to work into all those three views. So you can get it looking as solid and as 3D as you want. And it just, yeah, it takes a lot of looking around, of rotating and looking deep into your sketches to make sure there's no gaps, and making sure you fill them in. Also using thicker brushes as well helps, like the whole brushes, for example, they're much more voluminous, so you can get that depth a lot faster. Yeah, that's how I do that.
Awesome, thank you.
No worries.
I have a question, Rosie. Thank you
Yeah.
for the wonderful talk. If you had to choose like your top 3 things that would make your artistic life way better in VR that you would want somebody to develop, what would those things be?
Well, the first thing would be a headset that feels like glasses. You know, it doesn't feel like it's there. With my head shape, it's really small, so every headset I have just droops a bit. Oh, it's just too heavy sometimes. So I'd love a headset which is super light, and standalone at the same time. So like the Quest, but ultra light, because the Quest is quite heavy. So that's what I'd love from that. And yeah, I'd love an art tool which sort of combines a lot of elements of Quill and Tilt Brush together, because yeah, Tilt Brush is absolutely fantastic and amazing. I'd love the Tilt Brush aesthetic and everything, but with a few more options from Quill. So I'd like the animation tool brought into Tilt Brush. I'd like the layer system and colorizing of strokes and stuff. Those things would be really nice inside Tilt Brush. So yeah, that'd be my 3 points there.
Cool. And the follow-up question, have you considered, what's your opinion about VR versus AR and creating an AR? Have you considered that, or?
Yeah, see, I'm very much of, I don't like this world. I want to go into a different world. So that's why I started using VR as well, to escape. So AR is just sort of, you're adding another layer onto this reality rather than escaping it. But sometimes I just want to escape. So I see them very different, because it's just because of literally what I said. You're escaping into VR, but with AR you're just sort of like, you could be improving this reality by adding bits into it or something. But yeah, I see them very different. But it would be great to sort of combine the two and have, say, like a painting app in space in AR. That'd be quite cool. Especially for ease of showing people what they're doing. If everyone else has like these same glasses, everyone can see, and you can show it and place it in your room and stuff. That's pretty cool. I'd love that. But yeah, I'm definitely more of a VR girl at the minute, especially when AR is a little bit more to go, I think, before I'm so impressed by it. I've tried a few devices and haven't been blown away as such yet, because it often lacks in space. I'm so used to, I can imagine anyone who's not tried VR before hopping into AR glasses and being breathtakingly blown away. But with me, I'm used to putting on some goggles and seeing a whole expanse of space around me rather than just a condensed little window, which is what AR seems to be at the minute. So yeah, I was a little bit underwhelmed, but I see great potential in a few more developments of it. I really do.
Great. Okay, we'll let you practice. Feel free to write them.
Yeah, feel free to ask away. I'll be off from audio just for a few seconds, just whilst I plug this in. I'll let you know when I'm back in.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm in VR. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, great.
This one. Cool. So can you guys see me okay? Nice one. Yes, so if those of you who haven't been in Tilt Brush before, on one hand I have like a palette and the other one a paintbrush, and you can just interact with it by pointing. You've got your colours on one panel, got some brushes. A lot of people who go into Tilt Brush first off just create like a neon nightmare, just full of all these magical brushes. Lots of light as well here, stuff like that. There's a whole vast option for you, which is really cool. I recommend doing this, you know, just the first time in Tilt Brush, just hopping in and just using all the brushes, because you start to see the nature of them and you start to actually start thinking, I can make this with this, you know. Yeah, cool. So one of my favorite brushes is the whole brush, because you can create really big 3D forms super fast, and it's super good for laying out environment floor, so you can have all that substance there. Just make around this, and then you expand it out, and then all of a sudden you have this floor. It's just a really quick way of making floor and a ground. Each brush has its own personality and texture. So this is a shaded brush, which means that you can add lighting effects onto it and it will reflect back. Whereas some brushes are unlit, so they just have one color and won't really react that much to light changes. You have brushes which have a texture on them as well. So this is like a, let's do a line here. It's like, it looks a bit like a poo, but it has like a texture on it, which is perfect for doing stuff like bark and any sort of nature, branches and stuff like that. It's perfect for that because it has that shaded quality and texture to it as well, up close. I'm just going to really quickly mock this up and show you how to light a scene really fast. So already we have like the starting of a tree. This is like super speedy. And there's a little undo, redo sort of thing, so you can get super fast at, which is just using these two buttons on the Oculus here. You can get super fast at making scenes. And you can select and move things really easily as well. Just going to do another tree. There's two variations here. Seems okay from that side. You see how I'm constantly moving the scene around as well? Just so I'm checking it from every angle, making sure nothing looks bent or wonky, because a lot of people who have come from a traditional background, like 2D work and stuff like that, they often struggle to get to grips with the 3D-ness because they've never had to consider how things look from different angles. And it's a tricky thing to get used to if you've never done it before. But it's easier to learn how to do it in VR than it is in like Maya and stuff, because it's at your fingertips, it's more tactile. And this is what I think makes it different from traditional mediums as well, because of how tactile it is. And a lot of people who use traditional mediums haven't moved on to digital and stuff like that, like Wacom tablets and stuff, because they don't like how it removes the tactility of it. You know, when you're drawing on a tablet, it's not as you don't feel like you're holding a pencil. It doesn't feel tactile. But with VR, that's brought back again, and all of a sudden we're now physically moving and touching and having presence with our artwork. Feeling a bit like Bob Ross right now, especially with the words I'm using. It's like happy trees. So this is a brush that I use for shrubbery because it's fantastic at adding like a leaf effect really, really fast. So all of a sudden we've just got these two trees here right now. They've just sort of come to life out of nowhere. I don't know how much obviously you can see because of the frame rate and stuff, but I'll show you at the end.
Rosie, is there a way to get a point of view camera?
Yeah, I will do that in a sec. So yeah, these are the trees so far. Actually, I'll just bring you to you. So yeah, here we have two trees, just really fastly made. I'll put that back up here.
Thanks.
So I'll show you really quickly at the end because I'm nearly done actually. I was just gonna quickly make these 2 trees not 2 trees anymore and populate the scene around. Make more trees, make a forest. Here we go. So this is just how fast things can start. And this was just with 2 trees a minute ago, and then we have a forest. So if you want to really demo something super fast, it's perfect for that. But it's also perfect for something that you want to spend a little bit longer on. You can do. This is just me really quickly mocking this up for you, but you can create some really powerful scenes in Tilt Brush and worlds. So yeah, I'm going to move the camera in a sec. I'm just going to so at the minute I'm seeing from the world around and just adding a little bit more to the background. And then we can just about, yeah, cool. We now have a forest. So now I'm going to add some light. As I mentioned, I was going to show you quickly just some really cool rendering techniques. So this is the brush I go for this, and it's the smoke brush. First off, I can add that fog really quickly, just in the trees in the background. Obviously, I'll show you a different perspective. Here we go. So you see already we've got some fog there in the trees. And this is emissive. The more you layer it on, the brighter it gets. So if I just add a whole bunch over here, you can see it starts to get brighter the more I apply it. And this acts as light. It acts as a light source. You can also add an actual light source here. This is just the light brush. So you can just create a ball of light. That's your source of energy there. And this is a highlighter, which I often use for sun rays because it looks exactly like that. It's a sun ray. So you can add these lines in and instantly you have this sunburst effect, just all coming out of the sun. You can vary the different brush sizes as well, just by moving the slider in your hand, and you can get this different lengths of light into your scene. So already we have a really bright light now, and I'll show you a different perspective just in a minute. I'm just going to add quickly, I'll show you quickly, just adding some water. So the matte hull brush is fantastic for stones. Just quickly add some rocky textures into your scene, as I'm going to just add around this river here right now. There we go. Well, not river, it's more like a pond, isn't it? And this is fantastic for creating rocks really fast as well, because of you just stretch your arm, you stretch your hand around and move your arm, and there you go, you have a rock. It's effortless. Let's add a few in there as well, just and then the diamond hole is perfect for water. Just drag that out here like this, and instantly it looks like you have water. And using the highlighter that I mentioned earlier, you can create like some color inside that water, add a little bit more depth to it. And I love this brush for adding a feeling of movement. I mean, it's very, abstract, but it's super, super cool. It's like little fishies. And then some sparkles. Obviously, I'm going to move the camera view very soon. I'm just going to add some texture on the grass really fast. So you see how fast I'm making this, man. It's like high speed. So it's not the best, but it's just showing you what you can create really, really fast with this tool. And obviously I know I've had tons of experience in this, but you can create something of this scale just as fast and easy. Also, part of the time is you're not dealing with any complex UI, which is what slows you down a lot in the other 3D software platforms. Everything's just so easy and at your fingertips that it doesn't have time learning and knowing how to do stuff, because it's just all here on your hand, you know. It's adding a little bit more texture in the grass. Nice one. So I'm just gonna fill it in from above, see how it looks for you guys. There we go. And didn't mean to do that. Maybe add a few more trees just so you can show. I'll put that around. There we go. So let's move you guys so you can see. Shoom. There we go. So here's my 5-minute scene. Basically. Don't know how much you can see of that. Let's see how it looks for you guys. Yeah. So as you can see, you can create that light effect really, really simply by using all those highlighter brushes and smoke brushes that I mentioned. And what is really nice to do is like a little sparkle, just like things. Nice, gives the illusion of flies and stuff in the air and humidity and stuff like that. It's a little bit more magical. Yeah, and I'll just load up quickly another scene, which I've made use of the explorability aspect of VR. So I'm going to take you guys on a journey into a ship. Right. Here we go. So start off in this cave. I'm going to slowly move you through just because I know scene rates and stuff like that. I'm under the sea. And then we're going to go into the boat. And now we've gone inside. Looks a bit Stranger Things right now. And we're going to go through to the main part of the boat. I don't know how much of this you can see, but it's going at like 1 frame per second. There we go. Let's see through this window. I'll slow down a bit so it catches up. And through here. And then we see this open ocean. So I just thought I'd show you that quickly, just because I've shown you a rough scene, but this is a scene that took a little bit more time. This was only 40 minutes though, this is a 40-minute scene, so it's still not an overly large scene. This one took a lot longer. I'll show you it now. Let's load that up. When you design in VR, you can bring images in. So as you can see dotted around this space, I have images that are used as reference. So if you're wanting to create something like a portrait or something based off your concepts, you can just bring those concepts in and then you can have them lying around. It looks weird though, they sort of float in space, but you know, that's super cool way. And then this is a portrait of Catherine Johnson I did in Tilt Brush. This is a lot longer. This took a week. This is just loads of brush strokes coming together to really add the texture of her skin, bit by bit. And yeah, that's my demo, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, however brief it was. If anyone wants me to go any more in depth with anything to do with Tilt Brush, do let me know. Either like email me, DM me, or ask me a question now. Because yeah, now's the time for me to give you more tips and tricks if you want them.
Wow, thank you so much. This is so cool. Let's do a group applause. Turn on your audios if you can, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is awesome.
Thanks, guys.
I'll start with one. How do you do the, I know that usually like in 3D modeling and reconstruction and so on, so especially the face, I find it striking here, the details. So
Yeah.
it's hard, like, you know, usually things like glasses and teeth and eyes are super hard in reconstruction. I wonder how you approach those.
Yeah, so I'll show you actually firsthand. So this is me starting to draw Catherine. What you saw then was the end result, but this is how I started. So I used pictures of her, front profile, side profile, and combine them together to create this 3D block out using a black brush. So this is just a simple ink brush, and I use this as basically the outline. So all the 3D-ness will happen from inside this outline. So I could just start to add some 3D here, bit by bit, and then we start to get that 3D form coming together. So yeah, it's just using those side views as front views, and then doing this black ink line basically, which is what you do with 3Ds, where you bring a front profile and a side profile into a 3D software, and then you'll work from that bit by bit. But it's the same thing, apart from you draw the side and front profile inside a virtual space, and then you start filling it in virtual space.
Cool.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. I was noticing when you were putting your demo scene together that there's like real-time shadows, and I know you mentioned that there's lighting, and I'm certain other graphics arts, like non-VR graphic artist applications, they have these aspects, but I just never thought about this. Do you find the removal of having to deal with lighting and shadow a detriment or a benefit, and are there other small things like that like your traditional paper and pen 2D artists have to consider that you feel alleviated from, or that you feel like you lose control over in the VR realm because of things like, you know, automatic lighting and what have you?
Yeah, with Tilt Brush, you can really decide how you want the lighting to be. It's very flexible. You can change the color of it. You can change where the light comes from and the source. So it's really good in that aspect. And just rendering a scene really fast. A lot of the stuff I do is like speed sketches a lot of the time. So being able to make it look rendered really fast is an absolute benefit for me. Whereas if I was using something like Quill, which doesn't have lighting inbuilt into it, then I'd have to take a lot more time recoloring things to get that lighting looking okay, or as you just said there, exporting out to rendering it in like Eevee or something, just to get that exterior lighting and rendering. But a lot of people are doing that. A lot of people are taking Quill and Tilt Brush scenes and rendering them in a different platform, and each stroke comes out with a really interesting texture, and it looks really good if you use a 3D modeling renderer as well as Tilt Brush. But when you export out from Tilt Brush, you cannot export the light data that you get with it. That's all just embedded into the tilt file. So if you export out from Tilt Brush, you basically have your shaded, everything's still shaded, it's not unlit meshes, which you can then go render and light in Unity or Eevee or something like that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No worries. Yeah, so any more questions?
Cool. I think this is awesome. My final question: what are you? If it's not a secret, what kind of things are you working on now? What's your?
Yeah. So what I'm doing at XR Games is a secret, unfortunately. But we're working on another VR title. But VR artwork wise, I have a few projects which are formed around lockdown at the minute. So creating positive spaces and mindfulness and stuff like that is what I'm doing right now. And yeah, hopefully some more exciting stuff that I can talk about very soon as well. Unfortunately, it's a bit depressing when you can't actually share what you're working on. But yeah, it's some really exciting stuff. And yeah, keep an eye out on my socials, because I'll definitely be posting about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
So where can I try your art?
So I can drop actually a link to my Poly page, which is basically where you upload. You can see you can sign into Google from Tilt Brush and upload your sketches to a site called Poly, which is Google's own platform. And in that platform, you can like sketches. And when you have liked a sketch, you can go into your Tilt Brush panel and it actually shows here, liked sketches. And then when you click that, it loads up all the sketches that you've liked. And then when you click on one, it loads up into your scene. So you can actually explore my artwork that way. And have a little gander, walk around, and you can actually remix some of my scenes if you want to. So if you want to download and use in a Unity project, you can. If you want to actually start to add to my scenes, you can also do that too. But yeah, feel free to have a look, explore my scenes, because a lot of people have done that to get inspired about what brushes to use for certain things as well. Like this brush that I use for trees and stuff like that. Little tips hidden inside my artworks, which you can use to formulate your own ideas from.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah, no worries.
Great. All right. Turn on your mics and we'll do a final round of applause.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you.
Rose, do you mind dropping your email address if we have more questions or if we want to get in touch with you?
Yep, absolutely. I'll do that straight away.
Wow, that was awesome.